Okay, so after that, further ado, my name's Tom. I'm Thomas, usually in court, and I just as a background for myself, I know I'm from the Wirral. I grew up in New Brighton, and I've just not long ago I moved back home. After a career where I'm very reptile and amphibian focused, even though I am a general ecologist, I went back. I don't know. I was very starved when I grew up in the Merseyside. I was very starved for amphibians and reptiles. And coming back to the Wirral after I'd seen the rest of the rest of the UK as well as the world, I realised there was probably lots of undiscovered stuff on my doorstep I should have been aware of, but I wasn't. So in this talk today, we'll sort of talk about how amphibian and reptile groups, including the Wirral ARG, sort of fill that void. So I'll just go through the talk plan. This isn't really going to be a full-on description of every amphibian and reptile in the UK. This is going to be very focused on the work of our group, though we will do a recap. We'll give a very brief background of herpetology and the Wirral, what amphibian and reptile groups do across the UK, how we got started with the ARG, what projects we're in up to, how the membership has been growing and how people can get involved, and what we're going into what we're doing this year and into next year, and maybe the grander scheme of things as well, which is going to be very brief. But, as a recap, we've got 4 known amphibians of Indigenous, 4 known frogs, and 3 newts that are known to be Indigenous. These are what were left behind after the glacial retreat on Britain. There's some discussion that more frogs might have been present as well, even though we haven't got any today. But this is all based on zooarchaeological evidence. We have Natterjack toad, common frog, pool frog, and then there's the crested newts, smooth newt, palmet newts. And we have 3 of each of lizards and snakes, common lizard, sand lizard, slowworm. And for the snakes, you have grass snakes, adder, and smooth snake. Most of these, nearly half of each are of conservation concern. In some cases, even more of these are of conservation concern. But notably adder, smooth snake, sand lizard. While for the amphibians, it's pool frog, common toad, natterjack toad. And these are all threatened, in the most ultimate terms, is through, habitat threats, things, industrialized society. Habitat loss is the main loss, but also the industrialization and urban sprawl, which comes with other factors such as increased climate change and more invasive species, especially domestic cats, and maybe even diseases, novel diseases as well. This all cascades down to the ultimate causes for threats, definitely for British species, and these threats seem to be increasing. There are many NGOs which do their work to solve these problems. Things like the wildlife trusts, Chester Zoo, of course, and Record. But one amphibian and reptile groups, ARG'S UK, is a network which also is a good way for people to get involved, especially if they're very interested. ARG UK, the mission goals is to promote the conservation of native amphibians, reptiles and their environment by promoting and supporting the development of a network of independent amphibian and reptile groups. These 10, I'll give you a case study of when I first encountered ARG'S. This was actually in Yorkshire, and they were doing a lot of work on general surveys of various sites, but they also provided training on how to do amphibian surveys. And you also find that these are voluntarily run groups, but you will find on a lot of these, the people running them are themselves professionals, and they're actually doing the projects they want to do. Especially if they're passionate about conservation, or if they want to check out a site which they're interested in, it's something they can do in their own time. It's also quite useful for continuing professional development in many ways. And it's also a good way to get involved in citizen science projects. So if I can move my cursor around, I'll just circle this not very good picture. It's not very clear there, but there was sometimes there are national drives to for across all the ARGs is to do a specific project. In this case, we're measuring the size of toads in one reserve in Otley. Let's circle around that. And when I moved back to Merseyside, there was nothing on the Wirral at the time, but we did have the North Merseyside Amphibian and Reptile Group, which is still going. It's run by Mike Brown. And again, they were doing a lot of training and lots of surveys, especially on the Septon Coast, but there were other sites. And one other special thing which they did, which the Yorkshire one didn't do so much, but they did a lot of habitat management, again on the Septon Coast, to sort of reduce scrub encroachment in sand lizard and Natterjack toad habitat. So when I moved back to the Wirral, I thought, well, you know, I was quite eager to start exploring what I had possibly overlooked as a child. And as a reptile mad child, I probably did overlook a lot. And as things will go on, we'll see this. But the other thing is, the Wirral isn't itself a discrete county, and Frankby was trying to get the ARG going for the Wirral. My thoughts were initially to just keep to the Wirral Borough Council boundary, and my forgiveness if there are people active in Cheshire West. We're not trying to step on people's toes, but we've done a little bit there. But if you want us to stop, do let us know. But we tend to just think of the whole Wirral as the peninsula rather than the political boundaries. Again, this isn't going to be a surprise. I'm not going to wait till the rest of the talk to tell you what's here. We're going to tell you what's probably not here, what's definitely not here, and what has gone more recently. But for instance, we don't think there's definitely no smooth snakes. Smooth snakes tend to be further south. There's definitely no pool frogs, not on any records that we can find. But what we do have that's only 2 species down. There are records of everything else, even though I'd say I'm dubious about the adder records and the Palmet Newt records. I'm similarly uncertain. I'm sure they're more likely than the adder records, but we're not seeing, they're very easily confused with smooth newts if the wrong people are reporting them in. But that said, we actually, otherwise there would have been, if all things being equal, that would have been the full complement of reptiles we would have had. Apart from those 2 species, we should have had that full complement on the Wirral Peninsula. Unfortunately, this has not been the case. But in the past, I found this quote by Walter Rose, who's a pioneering herpetologist who went on to South Africa, and a lot of species are now named after him. But reading this excerpt, he said that his first contact with the lizard was from one collected after an excursion to Wallasey, which was then merely dunes, which is extremely different to what Wallasey is like now. Now this just gives an indication what things were like. This is Harrison Drive in Wallasey. Most of the older pictures of Wallasey are full of sand dunes, especially along the coast. But after the seawall and creation of the road network, it's Belly Road. The only potential sand dunes have now been covered over by grass, and this is just all over the show in the Wirral. Now, there used to be sand lizards on the Wirral, but the only records we can find, this is off the NBN Atlas records, most recent one, 1910. I think there's records on the local biological centre of maybe 1930s. They were still hanging on, but they are completely gone now. Likewise for Natterjack toad, similar story. They sand dune and heathland dependent. If we look at these records here, it wasn't just along the coast, but it was also this looks like around Thurstaston Common, which was a heathland, and Natterjack toads seem to have been there as well. There are Natterjack toads on the Wirral now, but they had to be reintroduced to Red Rock in the 1990s, and they're still hanging on now. And this map is a bit incomplete because when I've been in the Natural History Museum, in London, I've been finding jars of Natterjack toads from Wallasey, and they were collected in 1898. and it's probably Wallasey. Well, I'm not clear exactly where these were as well. I'm guessing Wallasey Village, maybe even the gun site, which we will talk about in a bit. So, like the general ARG objectives, the Wirral ARG objective, you'll hear the word ARG a lot. That means Amphibian and Reptile Group, but we do promote conservation of amphibians reptiles on the Wirral. We do monitor distribution and status of amphibians reptiles in the Wirral, including introduced species, especially if someone's pet snakes escaped. We're happy to help. We do liaise with and provide advice on management of habitats to relevant statutory and non-statutory organisations and the general public. So this can be a park ranger who wants to get to know things more, or even someone who just wants to look after, make their gardens better for amphibians and reptiles. We also want to foster interest in amphibians and reptiles and their conservation, and we want to develop the skills of those interested in these species. We do, this is the present committee, so it's not just myself. I'm supported by a committee including John Beelby, who's a lecturer, animal behaviour lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University. We're supported by Sue Noyce, who's been extremely active. Frankby Beelby herself, a former amphibian ecologist, and married to John. We were mentored by Mike Brown, who's himself been quite experienced surveying on the Wirral, even though he's extremely busy working around the Sefton coast. And our new committee member is Charles Muller-Ryan, who's been already very active surveying lizards across the coast for us. So we started small. I live in New Brighton, so you can see everything was in sort of cycling distance for me. But that was 2018 where we started doing the preliminary surveys. 2019, we sort of expanded a bit more to some other parks and areas. And this is where the group got going officially. And we've started to spread south. So we are doing more and more across the Wirral, and we are voluntary, so we are limited by time, but we do what we can. But our first event was after having a brief meeting, you went straight out to the new Ferry Butterfly Park after getting assistance setting up by Hilary Ash and Paul Loughnane. And one of the things about this is it's not just about recording; it's about enjoying ourselves. You know, the pond in the new Ferry Butterfly Park is full of is thronged with smooth newts, and we all had a pleasant evening just enjoying them and seeing what else we could find. But after that, we sort of cracked on with the more determined surveying, and we were definitely focusing first on the North Wirral coast, which is represented by numerous parks, and I'll sort of go through them. But a lot of these parks do have rough grassland, which and there's also some remnant sand dunes as well. And the status of the amphibians reptiles, we could do some updating. There were some reports of lizards here and there, but officially, if you go on the official records, you couldn't see much going on. You couldn't see much updated. So we decided to crack on and see what was there. So one of the first parks we started working with was Harrison Park. Now this is a park which is more a dog walking park. This is in Wallasey. It's near Wallasey Village. For me, this is a park where I walk my dog in. This is an old photo. You can actually see my Labrador. You see my Labrador just there. And that said, the grassland, looking at it, you'd think, why wouldn't lizards be living here? And so there's Frankie there. We got some, we used the artificial refuge method for finding lizards, because now I've been walking dogs there for years. The dog probably scared them away on the advance, but using these black square tiles is a bit more, you increase your chances of seeing lizards, especially if lizards go underneath. What happens is the black square heats up in the sun, the lizards go underneath or even on top to bask and warm up. And it's a nice way to sort of get them in a position so you can check right there. And you can see Frankie there just checking under a mat. And hey presto, we actually found that Harrison Park had had quite, it's one of the best sites in the Wirral for common lizards. We even found a lot of gravid females. It was only common lizards. Unfortunately, we had no slow worms. We got very, I should also say, and again, no surprise that we have almost so far we have found no slow worms ourselves, which is disappointing. We're still hoping we'd see some, but we still very much enjoyed that. We were getting quite reliable, quite regular observations of common lizards at this site, especially when they were breeding and also when young were coming out. And we're also monitoring for other reasons. Quite disturbingly, because this was about this was 2018 when the big fires started, and there's a lot of concern that this was going to be a regular thing. You know, we're quite, you know, I think everyone who's got their head screwed on sort of notices that these summers are a bit, we are getting more and more very hot summers and very dry summers, and it's becoming quite worrying. And so I thought it would be quite good to sort of, where these fires occurred was where we were finding lizards. It wasn't all of the park, but it was a substantial part of the park, and it was an opportunity for us to collect data. And what we did find that after, say, a few months of the recovery after the burning, we were still finding lizards. The grass was a bit shorter, but the lizards seem to have moved back in. And if we actually look at this map we have, if you look at this is the area that was burned in the park, we were finding lizards. As you can see, there were a lot of lizards in this burned area. We're also getting a lot of lizards along this is the railway track here. We were getting a lot of lizards along here. And what had happened, and after some regeneration, we started finding lizards again. We also started serving lizards in this central part, where most of the footfall is. So this is maybe where most of the people walk around, and we were pleased that there's still lizards using this site too. So it's this is quite interesting in the context of disturbance, and it was quite very probable that I never saw a lizard here because my dog scared them away. So, and that's another thing, so something I haven't mentioned yet, but what we've been finding as we've been doing this work in all these different parks is, even before you write any reports, as if the landowners, especially rangers, get to learn about what you're doing, what we found is it puts them in a better position to advise on the management of a site for the benefit of reptiles and amphibians. And this is one case in point in Harrison Park. If you look at this stretch here, this used to be mowed right down, but the rangers, on seeing that, and it's this stretch here, this used to be mowed right down, and the rangers thought it would be nice to sort of have these sort of patches connected up, and this is a case in point. And there was another point where the friends group of this park was sort of considering working out where best to plant trees. And what happened with the rangers is that they were able to guide them so that it didn't interfere with the lizard population. It's not just lizards, there's also very species-rich grasslands there too. So it was further information, further data and evidence for them to make the right decision. And we still like visiting Harrison Park. We actually want to use this for doing more, using it as a sort of gauge for when the lizards disappear for winter and when they reappear again. And I was checking we still have maps down for people to monitor. We still have volunteers, of the trained volunteers in our ARG, they do go out and monitor those refugia too. And we are sort of, another thing we're trying to monitor is frequency of which we find lizards without their tails. Another park which is not far from Harrison, right, maybe across the road, is the Red Noses. This isn't really a protected, managed park. It's definitely green belts. It's mostly scrub. Again, walking around it, you wonder why wouldn't lizards live here? Why wouldn't any reptiles live here? And they were not at the densities of Harrison Park, but we were definitely pleased to find that they do occur there, but not in great density. And only when I put refugia down, though it's quite different because it's different for some people, some lucky people, because this is a photo we were shown recently on social media by a lady who put some picnic blankets out, and a common lizard at the red nose, a common lizard came out and sat with her. So I think it's me. I think they just don't like me. Moving down more to more designated areas for conservation. North Wirral Coastal Park has many sites of biological importance. There's a remnant sand dune there. I'm very much involved with the Friends of the North Wirral Coastal Park, who are very focused on managing habitat to reduce visitors' impact on it. And it was through them that I learned that they were occasionally seeing common lizards. So we decided to, and it's not just that side, but we did get common lizards quite reliably. Again, they weren't as, it doesn't feel like they weren't as common as in Harrison Park though. But we did find them. But we're also finding common frog. We didn't really find amphibians in Harrison Park at all. There was no ponds at all there. And not really any in the red noses too, which is interesting. But there is a couple of ponds inland adjacent to the gun site, so the North Wirral Coastal Park. And we did get quite a few common toads as well, which again, this is interesting. So common toads are becoming of concern at the moment. There's been lots of declines, especially in the south of England. If anyone wants to mention if they've in New Brighton, I've noticed common toads used to be around more of a residential areas, but I'm not seeing any now. So it's nice to get the data, especially terrestrial data, on their distribution across the park. And we've been finding breeding sites. This is at Leso Lighthouse, which we find is a prime common toad breeding site. And again, it's just good to get this, and it's good to realize that lots of species we think are common can suddenly start to decline. I was quite surprised, I was quite taken aback that house sparrows were becoming so rare. Just check the time. Lockdown, the North Wirral Coastal Park is quite big. There's Derby Pool, the Wallasey Dunes, the gun sites, Leso Common, Lacer Lighthouse, and Mells Dunes. It is quite a big site, so the lockdowns did impact our ability to keep going with the surveys, but we did keep going with the survey. So if you can see here, we were clearly trying to make an album cover during our socially distanced surveys of the North Wirral Coastal Park. And we did sort of start surveying more complementary areas, such as here at the Derby Pool site. We actually put refugia down here, and very quickly, before we even did our first survey, people were sharing pictures of lizards basking on our refugia, sharing those on social media. So we would, even without us even leading any surveys, people were still people becoming aware without us really telling them, but just more encouraging the lizards to come out and show themselves. And again, going back to our findings impacting the decisions of landowners and land managers, I'll just highlight here, this is a refugia created by the rangers at the gun site, because they actually cleared a patch of elm trees, invasive elm trees, and they're trying to restore it to sand dune again. And they made this little sort of hibernacular for which I hope reptiles and amphibians will start using, and other sand dune species too. Going on again, I started surveys on Central Park. Again, these have been now taken over more by Sue. And apart from surveying, Central Park is a very urban park, or you'd think it would be a very urban park, but there are a few nice ponds there. I was very curious if newts were using them, but we also found that has a very prime common frog breeding aggregation every year. We've started to monitor how many egg spawns how many clumps of spawn are being seen at this site. I think I counted 58 at one point, and it's not bad. This park is being managed more for biodiversity than one would think. This is right next to this card. And I had a very exciting experience doing a torch survey in the preliminary days, where someone walks off with my bicycle, even though it was locked behind a gate, and I had to convince him I wasn't a bike thief myself. So the bike thief was trying to make sure I wasn't a bike thief either, but it was all amicably settled. But yeah, we were very pleasantly surprised to find that there were newts there. Again, there's no records that we could find of newts occurring there. I did meet a former ranger who said he knew newts were there, but again, there was no real record, and he was clearly not submitting it to the record centres. But not only were we surveying amphibians here, we are taking good records of this, but we're also doing litter picks and removing the garbage, because these ponds do get filled with rubbish, and it probably, it's the broken window syndrome. We think that if there's more rubbish in there, more people will throw it in. So ourselves, we do what we can. The rangers, when they get the opportunity, do go in with a boat and get what we can't reach. And I'd also say there are terrapins in this pond. We're actually looking forward to, we are getting a lot of baseline data on what's going on. So in case the terrapins change for whatever reason, we'll be able to trace what happens. I forgot to also note these are bottle traps that we use. These are sort of funnel trap you put in the water, and it's usually used for capture newts, but it's also quite effective for tadpoles as well. Something else which wasn't really my idea, but because we have the public presence now, after the group was officially run, we had our website, we had our Twitter page. We were actually contacted by a young man called Luke Anderson, who said, "Hey, I keep going to Bidston Moss and I keep seeing lizards. Can you come and have a look and see if we're doing everything we can?" And this is a nice example of other people sort of networking and all working together, because we did sort of visit Bidston Moss. This is with the then Rangers' blessing. This is it's Forestry Commission land, and this is land that we later found out wasn't really Forestry Commission land, but it was still quite important that we were quite pleased to find smooth newts, common toad, and plenty of common lizards. And this is area that could potentially be developed on or considered for development. And it was quite important that we got that data in, because again, this was not on the official records that what we could find. And then moving on to great crested newts. So great crested newts, there's a paucity of recent records on the Wirral. If you actually look at a map of the Wirral, of their occurrences, they should be all over. And I think most people would say, yeah, we don't see many of them. No, these are all historical records going back to the first half and maybe even into the second half of the 20th century. Great crested newts are protected. They seem to have declined across Europe, including Britain, even though Britain's a stronghold technically for great crested newts. But if we treat the Wirral as a microcosm, they seem to be in quite severe, in the Wirral context, they do seem to have been in quite severe decline. Again, and this is all based on records data and anecdotal data, and updated knowledge is not well. So the main thing, looking at the map, I saw that the most recent records were in Royden Park, which is near Frankby. So we planned some surveys and habitat management. On visiting Royden Park, it's quite apparent that a lot of the ponds were just not suitable. The great crested newts have very specific requirements for pond management, for pond quality, and it's to do with how often it dries, how deep it is, especially how many plants are in there, and how much shade there is from trees. And it's not necessarily shade's a factor, but it's also branches falling in and causing anaerobic digestion, which affects oxygen levels, which affects plant growth and may affect invertebrates. But there's lots of things at play there. But once you see a good crested newt pond, and there is an index you can calculate. So we started habitat management right away. We were going into winter. We could tell which ponds needed it the most, and then and we sort of worked around lockdown and managed to do surveys. Now we did torchlight surveys, like at Central Park, and we did lots of bottle trapping there. So there's Charlie there with some bottle traps. There's John with some more. We were sampling all the ponds in the main park. We didn't get that much into Third Saturn Common, but we sort of kept it to the northern section of the park. And we were very pleased to see great crested newts are still extant at Royden Park. We also got plenty of smooth newts. They're still there. And what I'm also doing is I'm trying to track individuals based on the belly pattern. So we're taking a log of all the, if we ever capture a newt and able to get our hands on it, we do this. I must say this is all under license. We did all this under license, which is required to handle, disturb, and trap for these newts. You don't really need a license to trap smooth newts. And there's one. I realised I didn't have a picture of a newt with a crest on there, but here we go. There's one there. One thing I did say we have noted, unfortunately, is that this is not a large population. It's we never got more than 10 great crested newts in one night, and which is good that we actually pressed on with the habitat management right at the beginning. And we only found them breeding in one pond. We saw them visiting one other pond, and we have this plan now to sort of make more ponds suitable for breeding in. And this is it. So if this is a great crested newt egg, and this is how you can tell if a crested newt's been laying, or any newt's been laying an egg, but it's easier to see with a great crested newt. You see how they fold the leaf over like that. So I've been told that sometimes a female will lay the egg and the male will go and eat the egg, but that's an interesting anecdote. I've shown a picture of this plant. This is one of the plants they lay the eggs on, and the pond in the background is a very little pond, which was it's a lined pond not far from the ranger's office. We did find when I first came across it, it was full of New Zealand pygmy-weed. And New Zealand pygmy-weed is this invasive species. You guessed it. It's from New Zealand, Australia. And it can over-dominate ponds, and it's very hard to remove. And it actually removes the whole water column, so it almost terrestrializes a pond. And it's also, and by doing this, it outcompetes the other plants which the newts need to lay their eggs on. So, and again, going back to, we didn't actually do anything, but this was done by, after we did the assessment, we made a preliminary report to the Ranger Service. This was shared with the other groups working in Royden Park, and special shout out to Wirral Evolutions, who took the initiative. They went to that pond and they removed, following our guidance, they removed as much of the New Zealand pygmy-weed as possible. They haven't eradicated it. It's very difficult to eradicate, but after they did this, the water column of the pond was open, and that spring I did see a female crested newt in that pond investigating it. The only problem is that it didn't have there was nothing for her to lay eggs on. And so by doing this, we're actually translocating some plants from the pond which did have newts breeding on, and they were laying their eggs on that plant. There was no eggs on that plant. We didn't do a translocation of newt eggs. We were just moving the plants over to make it more suitable. So we have been cracking on with winter tasks. We had five task days through the winter of 2019 into 2020. We haven't had any for last winter for obvious reasons. And we picked a couple of ponds where there is a lot of crowding by trees. And if you can see here, we were make it more open so sunlight can get to those ponds, get to that water column, so we can encourage more aquatic plants to go up. And if you show a nice before and after effect, again, this isn't perfect, but it's a good start. And if you, again, likewise here, this is before and this is after, and it could be even more open than that. And what we've been finding at least for this pond, and this is a pond we're going to be focusing more of our efforts on now, is because this, and it's not far from where we saw that female crested newt checking out the pygmy-weed pond. We are going to be focusing more of our efforts there. I've already been finding more ducks visiting it. Then I've been finding more zooplankton and invertebrates in that pond. I've been seeing more aquatic plant growth. Just checking the time. So I'm already 45 minutes. So I'll try not to speak too much longer. So yeah, we're very encouraged, and I've just found out just before I gave a talk that we're going to get a bit more funding so we can get a bit more work done on this pond, so we don't have to rely on volunteer days. Now, we were sort of caught short in finishing off this pond, but we've got some funding so we can get contractors in to do it now. But we need to work out the nuts and bolts of that. Now we've got the money, we need to work out what we're exactly going to do. But yeah, and it was actually the Friends group which led the funding bid. Again, we're here, we say what's important, we do the surveys, we help with the task. But what we've realised, many people take it further once we start. Other winter tasks we have special mention of. We did a task with the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and we were helping, apart from removing scrub and red rocks to sort of keep the sand dunes there, we also managed to help get some of the reeds out of the ponds for that, where the Natterjacks breed. Natterjacks do need sort of more open ponds so that they can heat up in the sun more, and the reeds are a problem for that. They reduce the sunlight getting there. And if you can see this nice picture here where the reeds are coming up, you can see where we've been working sort of to get the roots out, and that should have had a good impact for the recruitment of Natterjack toadlets in that year. That was last year. And going into another national, I guess it's a citizen science project which has been encouraged by the ARG UK group, is taking DNA samples of common toads. Like I mentioned, common toads are in decline, and what this University of Wolverhampton study, what needed was populations of common toads where we know that they seem to be stable, where they seem to be a robust population. And one of the best places to have a robust common toad population is where people are attempting to do Natterjack toad conservation. So this spring I did, before the Natterjack started calling, the common toads had started breeding, and we went in and we took a DNA sample from them. And I've been told that there are historical samples of red rock for them to make DNA samples of. So we're going to be very excited to do that. But this is a UK-wide thing which other ARG groups are doing, and it just shows how ARGs do sort of work together, and they do have a bigger impact. We've also been helping the Cheshire Wildlife Trust with setting up reptile surveys of Cleaver Heath, and that's been led by Alan Irving, who's a Cheshire Wildlife Trust wildlife warden. And he's been finding common lizards in various sites, especially where they've been doing habitat improvement, especially removing excess bracken. And the other thing is, if you do join an amphibian and reptile group, you do get a discounted attendance fees for the herpetofauna workers meetings, which I find them very useful. I have a PhD in freshwater ecology, but I didn't know that thing about how to manage a pond until I went to this. And Carl Sayer from University College London talked about his research on managing farm ponds, and what happens when he removes trees, or if he doesn't remove trees from around the pond. We also got to present our findings there and share our findings with other groups across the country. And we've been very pleased. The membership growth has been slow. It was stifled a bit by 2020, even though we had a fair good surge. It's not the growth. Obviously, I'd like more members, but we're very happy for the members we have. We're going to have more of a stronger drive for the members in the next year. Now that we're doing more. One thing I'm very pleased with the group is there's a diverse age range, and yeah, and with due respect, when I go to other friends groups for parks and other wildlife groups or volunteers, they tend to be retirees, and it's usually, I'm sure the reason for that is because they have the time. But I'm very pleased that we do have a median age of 29. We do have a couple of youngsters which do accompany with their parents. The youngest is 11. I think they were 10 when they first started coming out with us. And it's still not 50-50 male-female, but it's definitely plenty of, it's not far off for that level up. And we do charge £5 a year, and that mostly pays for this artificial refuge that we are all cutting and putting out. It does, maybe it's less of an issue for me now, but it was again a bit hairy at a certain time when the contacts were few and far between. But one of the great things is we don't do that much outreach. I did have an email from a school once to come along, but I think they realised I didn't have many animals myself. But we do have a lot of people on our Facebook page. You can follow the Facebook page without being a member. We do have 240 Twitter followers, and we do have the website, and we do get quite a few queries off the public. I had an indirect query from the British Herpetological Society where someone had concerns about lizards in a housing development near Lisa, who actually thought they were sand lizards, but they weren't. And we do get inquiries from other professionals too. But one of the highlights of our social media is we had, like I said, we found no slow worms at all, and someone from Little Sutton got in contact to say that they found a slow worm, and we got that into our recording system. And this is from the NBN records, and that yellow star is a nice complementary record for slow worms in there, which we were very pleased with. But it's not as good as finding them ourselves, but we'll take that. There is the ARG'S UK do have their own recording system. When I've used it, I tend to find my record, when I was in Yorkshire and using it, my records were going on the NBN network quite within a year sometimes. I've put records on, when I've been hiking in the Highlands, I've seen a lizard and just put it on there as I've gone along, and that's gone on quite within a year as well. Again, I want to say this is complementary to record, the local biological record centre. And maybe one point is someone did think they'd seen sand lizards, which they clearly didn't and hadn't verified, and that got on a bit too quickly. But I'm the one verifying their records now, so that shouldn't happen too often. But yeah, we do have a system for recording observations which do get into the public domain. So 2020. So I think I've gone over slightly than I intended, but we're on and up. We're moving forwards. The idea is for a stronger, more sustainable committee and membership. I don't want it to all be me. I want this to. We want this so that lots of people can get involved and contribute and lead the way from the back, from the front, all of us together. We want to continue with Royden Park and elsewhere, continue surveys of the North Wirral parks, and at some point, even in the bigger scheme of things, make an action plan for crested newts across the entire Wirral, because I haven't even talked about the other projects we've been doing for other ponds on the site. This is the map for what we're going to be doing in the next couple of years. I want to get more done around Eastern Country Park. I'd like to get more done on non-native species, including alpine newts. Not that we've seen any, but if anyone sees alpine newts, do get in touch. I mentioned terrapins before, and we are hoping to contribute to the turtle tally, even though we tried to do it on the one day they asked us to do it and none of the terrapins came out. We couldn't. That was when that first came up, when they said you could only record in one day. And we went somewhere where we knew terrapins were, and terrapins didn't come out. The ARG'S UK do want more surveys done in cemeteries, and so we've started surveying Frankby Cemetery because it's right next to Royden Park, and there might be another crested newt habitat. though so far that's not the case, but we have found a common toad breeding site. And we are hoping to do a study to see if Natterjack toads are breaking out of the red rock and seeing if they're going to start colonizing other habitats. So we're just going to see what the propagule pressure is and see. It might be interesting, it might not be, but lots of late nights anyway. And that's it. These are the again the ranges of the Wirral Council have been extremely encouraging and extremely, go on, get it done. Hilary Ash and Paul Loughnane have also been very helpful, especially Hilary, and likewise Sarah and Fiona at the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, friends of Royden Park and friends of North Wirral Coastal Park. And there's probably more I haven't. If you're offended, well, sorry. And this is how to find us.